Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 FedEx St. Jude Classic Initial Research Show. We have reached the playoffs for the PGA Tour. Quite an exciting finish for Lucas Glover, playing his way into the playoffs there at the Wyndham. It was a little bittersweet, at least for me. Lucas Glover helped me in DFS, but I had the outright on Billy Horschel, so a little bit of win, a little bit of loss there, which gets me to our big shout out. Gabe let me know right before the show this evening that he had two lineups that finished inside the top 100 in the big $3 GPP. So congratulations, Gabe, on your success this week for the Wyndham Championship. For myself, again, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. Was really rooting for Billy Horschel there on the outright ticket. That did not get across the pay line for us, but DFS was successful enough to pretty much break us even. Haven't totaled it all up yet, but I had one lineup with Lucas Glover. Happened to be the 1-6 of 6 lineup that I got through. It was a powerhouse lineup with Henley, Adam Scott, who fell apart on Saturday and then really played well the Sunday. Of course, Lucas Glover, Eric Cole. It was a big time lineup. Last I saw, it was in the top 35 in a big GPP. So a little bit of a mixed bag for me myself, but congratulations, Gabe. But we move forward to the St. Jude, and the St. Jude has underwent some changes in recent years. The course is the same. We are at TPC Southwind, but the tournament structure has went through quite a few changes. So we'll get through that as we go through the show. I'm trying to think of other things for this intro. I am going to be starting Kick this week, probably Friday night. Going to try to do a Friday night chill stream. So if you are available on this Friday evening, come by, hang out. It's going to be very relaxed. Have music going. Might take a look at some lineups for Showdown and weekend golf for the FedEx St. Jude. Definitely going to be playing some games, as there's one that I have found recently that I really enjoy. So want to be playing that on stream. So stop on by. It's going to be really relaxed. We're going to have a lot of fun. Just hang out on a Friday evening. So that'll be this week. Let's see, anything else that I can think of. I believe the Tour Championship will be finished by the time I go on my vacation, but we'll have to see about that in the coming weeks. But let's get into the actual show in the FedEx St. Jude, shall we? So all statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler, a much better golf DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. I did put in Kick as well, so all 4 social media sites, Twitter and Instagram, mainly where I post research around the week's PGA tournament. That'll be no different. I'll come out with some research tomorrow around the FedEx St. Jude and TPC Southwind. If you'd like to see that research, give me a follow at your preferred social media site, Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I place my weekly betting cards. That'll be no different this week as well for the FedEx St. Jude. That comes out Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the weekly wagers that I make for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I do baseball content. That will pick up right after my vacation. Like I said, it's a very busy summer. So if you would like to see some baseball content, quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. And then for the last part of social media, Gabe's Twitter is also in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. Highly suggest you go show him support, follow him over on Twitter, and subscribe to that article. It is free. It's a very good read. Gets you very well prepared for the week at hand. And, of course, with the shout-out, He also does very, very well in DFS content as well. So go show some support to Gabe. Follow him on Twitter. Subscribe to that article, because if you are a subscriber, you will be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday evening after Calls, and the DFS Tactics show, as we continue the DFS talk over there in his Substack chat. If you were able to join us last week, you would know he was very, very high on Adam Scott, pretty high on Glover. So it was a very, very strong week for him in terms of DFS. And finally, for this long ranting intro that I've messed up 3,000 times, we're live. Chat is open. I do want to hear from you all. Did you have Lucas Glover outright? If you did, congratulations. Let me know. Jump in chat or put it in the comments. Reach out to social media. Would love to be able to shout out more members of the community who have success. What do you think about Justin Thomas finishing 71st in the FedEx Cup? Do you think he belongs on the Ryder Cup? Any other content that you want to talk about in terms of FedEx St. Jude or golf in general? Jump in chat. Would love the interaction. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 FedEx St. Jude Classic. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening with the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. And I will tell you now, as my camera focuses in, this is going to be quite a bit of a shorter show. But let me get through this tournament fact sheet, and I will explain a lot of the changes to the format of the FedEx St. Jude right after. So we are in Memphis, Tennessee at TPC Southwind, just above what you can see there. The St. Jude has went through numerous changes. It was originally a regular event on the PGA Tour, then got turned into a WGC, similar to, say, WGC Mexico and WGC Bridgestone, WGC Match Play, these premier events for golf where players from all over the world would play in these events in a no-cut event. And then last year, the St. Jude got turned into the first playoff event instead of the Northern Trust. While that is true this year, that it is still the first playoff event, last year had 125 players. This year, with the new changes to the PGA Tour and event structures and standings and all that, only 70 have made it here this year. So the FedEx St. Jude went through numerous changes in terms of tournament format. And that's why the show will be shorter. There's not a lot that I felt comfortable with using in terms of comparing against other full field courses, because the format has changed so much, even though the course is still the same. The St. Jude has been played at TPC Southwind for a long time now. It is a regular on the PGA Tour. But in terms of TPC Southwind specifically, nothing to do with Architect this week. This is a Ron Pritchard design. TPC Southwind is a par 70 that measures 7,243 yards. So while it is a medium length or average length course in terms of total yardage, it actually does play fairly long since it is a par 70. Only 2 par 5s at TPC Southwind, similar to the Wyndham Championship. These are very, very small greens, 4,300 square feet in total, or the average green size. You have only 22 acres of fairway. These fairways are narrow. They are difficult to hit. A lot of rough, 11 holes with water in play. This is a pretty difficult test of golf, even though the winning scores have been in the mid-teens. You get the best players in the world, and if they are playing at their best in that week, they are going to shoot well no matter what the conditions are. But generally speaking, this is a very, very difficult test of golf. It rewards players that are playing well, but if you are not, you are going to accumulate some very high scores very quickly. Just like last week at the Wyndham Championship, we are on Bermuda grass, pure Bermuda grass on the greens. The difference is the fairways here at TPC Southwind are zoysia. And zoysia is quite a bit different of a grass. It's very sticky. Can be, especially if it's in the rough, it can be very difficult to play out of. But in the fairways, I don't think it leads to too much trouble. But it is important to note if you are or if you're much more well versed in grass types than I am, these are zoysia fairways, but we are on Bermuda Greens, and we're going to be looking at Bermuda putting, and that's a big reason why I was so high on Billy Horschel going into last week's Wyndham Championship. You got to think Bermuda Billy. But there's a look at the course, TPC Southwind, in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Again, a long par 70. I mean, not long in terms of total yardage, but it'll play very long. 7,200 yards, a little bit over that. Par 70, very, very small greens. Difficult course, 11 holes with water in play. Not a lot of fairway, whole lot of rough. And Bermuda Greens is what we're going to be looking at for the week. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National. And you will see that we have the updated field in here minus Lucas Glover. So if I sort on or sort alphabetically, you'll see we don't have Lucas Glover in here. He will be added, I'm sure, by tomorrow. But anybody who is starred had a chance to make the playoffs and then did not due to their performance at the Wyndham Championship. So you see Justin Thomas finishing 71st, Austin Eckrope, Ben Taylor. So anybody with a star is not in the field this week for the FedEx St. Jude. And then the only player we are missing is Lucas Glover. But with that, of course, with this being the playoffs, everybody in the PGA Tour is here. Scotty and John Rahm, Xander, Ricky, Rory. If you've played well for the PGA Tour season, you are here. I have not seen any withdrawals yet or players choosing not to play. Not going to go through strokes gained total. That would almost be a representation of the FedEx Cup standings. So instead, let's take a look at a couple of different things, especially in terms of total performance. One thing I would like to do, let's take a look at par 70s, especially since we have a smaller field and this is going to be a shorter show anyway. Let's just take a look at par 70s and see who plays, generally speaking, the par 5 few courses well. So on par 70s this calendar year, our top performers have been Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Ricky Fowler, Corey Connors, Xander, Sepp Straka, Tommy Fleetwood, Wyndham Clark, and Terrell Hatton. Let's see. We'll cover the win tomorrow. I don't want to do anything with course length. This is still 7,200 or a little bit over 7,200 yards, even though it'll play longer since it's a par 70. Of course, no architect to speak of in terms of a filter. This is a Ron Pritchard design. And before we go to, say, putting, we'll have to check the course breakdown and the past course conditions, which is what I would like to see as well. We can look at some approach. This will be a big picture view. Again, I don't want to do anything too data intensive or too narrow on an initial research. So our top strokes gained approach players this calendar year, the entire calendar year: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Ricky Fowler, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Alex Smalley, Hideki, and Tom Hoge. All right, let's take a look at the course breakdown here in Fantasy National for TPC Southwind. It is going to be important to note that this is for, I believe, Will Zalatoris' year is not included in this set of data. I could be wrong in that, but I don't believe Zalatoris' win last year is included in this. But the first thing I like to do when going through a scorecard here on Fantasy National, let's look for the 9th and 10th most difficult hole. If par falls in between there or close to there, we know it's about an average level difficulty course. Well, fortunately for us, 9th and 10th are back-to-back. They're still playing over par. 11th most difficult plays over par. You have to get to the 12th most difficult hole before you find par, which backs up what I was saying in terms of the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. That would lend itself to be on the difficult end of the scoring spectrum, and that is not going to mislead us this week, as some of the more difficult holes, number 1 hole, quarter of a shot over par, 2/10, 1500s, 1700s, 1300s. There's a few double bogeys around, especially on these difficult holes with water on them, especially the par 4, or excuse me, the par 4 12th, the par 4 18th has a double bogey rate, 5.5%. Par 3 14th, very long, 205 yards with water, 5.5% double bogey rate. But there are a lot of bogeys on this course. Again, you can rack up the squares very quickly. In terms of the other end of the spectrum, the easy holes, you do have a couple. The par 5 16th, very short, 530 yards, plays to a full half a shot under par, yields an eagle about 3%, a good rate, not fantastic, but certainly a birdieable hole. And then the other par 5 plays to a quarter of a shot under par. So again, 2 very gettable holes, but you very, very quickly get into holes where par is a good score. 16th, 1/10 under par, 15th, or the 4th easiest, I should say, 500ths under par. Not a lot of great scoring opportunities here at TPC Southwind. Generally speaking, except for the par 5s, par is going to be a good score. In terms of strokes gained by shot type for our top 10s, this is a ball striking course. These greens are small. You have to hit them. The fairways are narrow. Need to hit those. It is generally a ball striking course, especially for these top 10s. You see the approach by far outweighing the putting, off the tee outweighing the around the green. So lending itself to being a ball striking course. We go to the top 5s. Much more of the same. Although the around the green does start to catch up to the off the tee, the approach is starting to widen from the putting. And then for our winners, all in approach. And you can see even the off the tee for the winners really take off from the around the green. So the heavy emphasis in ball striking this week, with a little bit of putting, sure. Around the green, probably going to have a little bit of a factor. I mean, again, these greens are small, but another week, just like the Wyndham, just like the 3M, we are focused on the ball strikers this week. In terms of strokes gained by hole by par, because there's only 2 par 5s, you see they are quite mitigated, almost level with the par 4s and the par 3s. In terms of strokes gained, we move to the top 5s. They are actually the lowest of the pars. Par 3s are the highest, 4s and 5s are all fairly even, but that is very, very rare to see par 5s be the lowest strokes gained by hole by par. Just again emphasizing that there's only 2 par 5s. They are not going to carry much weight at all this week. And then for our winners, probably getting a little bit of help from eagles, I would say. But the general trend is the same. It's all about even. These par 3s are generally pretty difficult. You need to play them well. Par 4s, much the same. Some of them, the par 4 second, a little bit easier. It's the 3rd easiest hole on the course historically. But majority of your tough holes here, the very long par 4 17th, par 4 18th, par 4 7th, par 4 5th, long, difficult holes. So you have to score on the par 5s. They're not going to be ignored, but they are certainly mitigated in importance here. All right, moving to hole composition. We have 4 par 3s. 2 of them are fairly short, 150 to 175. We got a medium length, 175 to 200. And then the very long, difficult par 3 on the front 9, I believe. Par 3, nope, I lied. Par 3 14th. So on the back 9, 205 yards on the scorecard. Very long, difficult hole there. Our par 4s, we do have a short, not drivable, but short par 4, 350 to 4. We've got 4 from 400 to 450. The majority of our par 4s, half of them at TPC Southwind, are from 450 to 500 yards. And then we do have 1 long par for the 17th, 505. The 2 par 5s evenly split from 500 to 600, 1 below 550, 1 above 550. Approach shot distribution. Majority of approach shots come from 150 to 175 here, but there are several approach shots that come from 175 to 200, especially in terms of in relation to the average PGA Tour event, and even 125 to 150. Again, this isn't a long course by its technical standards, only 7,243 yards, but it's still par 70, so it's going to play longer, play difficult. Most of your approach shots here are from 150 to 200, mainly 150 to 175. Unfortunately, again, with the changes to the tournament structure that the FedEx St. Jude has went through, don't have anything to do with comparing to other courses. Just decided to kind of treat this as a new year in terms of that, and we'll start to evaluate that moving forward from this year. Historic cut line, so I was mistaken when I began the course breakdown. The Will Zalatoris year is in here, and you see it was -1 last year, but this was the playoff event where the players had been generally in good form, had earned their way to the playoffs. It was -1. It's been above par every other time here at TPC Southwind when there's been a cut. So again, that just emphasizes the difficulty that TPC Southwind presents. Scoring distribution, 17.5% birdies, 16% bogeys, but that doubles bar is pretty darn high. And in fact, if you stack the doubles and the bogeys, you're going to get more than birdies and eagles. So more scores over par than under par here at TPC Southwind. Driving accuracy, much lower here than the average tour event. Again, difficult fairways to hit, narrow, an emphasis on off the tee this week. Ball striking in general, as you can see again with these greens, they're small. Green and regulation percentage here, extremely small. Less than 60% here versus over 65, almost 66% at the average tour event. Scrambling is easier here than the average tour event. Not by much, about 2%, but scrambling easier here than the average tour event. 3 putts per round. This is not surprising with the very small greens. 3 putts per round, you would not think would be a big deal. We saw that be a decent factor at the Wyndham. I thought it would be, but here not so much. Distance, even though these fairways are difficult to hit, you're still going to have to take driver on the majority of these holes. They are long par 4s, difficult. You're going to have driver. So distance is higher, but it's not like players don't care about being in the rough. The fairways are just that difficult to hit. So distance higher, not a surprise with very small greens. The proximity, if you are hitting the green in regulation, much closer to the hole, just over 25 feet here, 29 at the average tour event. So there's a look at TPC Southwind from a graphical and scorecard view here in Fantasy National. I'll keep that up. Before we go back to the page view of players at the FedEx St. Jude this year, let's check the historic conditions very, very quickly. And this is only showing the Northern Trust, as you know, it was played at Liberty National, TPC Boston, all that. So last year, of course, at the Bermuda Greens, played to average with one round of easy in the beginning. I'm going to mainly think it's going to be average, perhaps difficult, but it's best to think of it as average. Rough length was average. The green speeds are fast. I wanted to check, make sure they weren't lightning, but they are fast. And in fact, something else that I can do, let's check the WGC St. Jude. When this was a WGC, we can take a look, because it was always played at TPC Southwind. You see the rough lengths were average. Every green speed was fast. And think about it, as a WGC, the top players in the world, you're still getting rounds that are generally average. All of 2019 average. 2020, all of it was average. Now 2021 was easy with one round of difficult. I think this would be much more of an outlier. I'm looking much more so at the average scoring difficulty. There are birdies here, but there are bogeys and a few doubles as well. But I mainly wanted to see green speeds from when the WGCs were happening. So now that we have that information, I will back us out to the beginning of 2022, and we are on Bermuda Greens, and every single round has been fast at TPC Southwind. So our top putters in the past 18 or so months on fast Bermuda Greens have been Ben Griffin, Andrew Putnam, Denny McCarthy, Sam Burns, Brendan Todd, Matt Kuchar, Sam Ryder, John Rahm, Wyndham Clark, and Terrell Hatton. Again, anybody with a star is not in the field. They did not make the playoffs for the St. Jude playoffs. Hopefully you get the reference. All right. With that, we're going to... I would look at tournament history, but again, this is much more so for the Northern Trust as opposed to... Actually, no, I don't. I think this is for TPC Southwind. 2021, 2020, 2019, and 18, and then 17 when the FedEx St. Jude was a regular PGA Tour event. So yeah, we can take a quick look at this. It does not have last year's playoff event in it. You see the strokes gained total leader for TPC Southwind did not make the playoffs this year. Hideki has played well at this course. Again, granted, with a little bit of a grain of salt here, these 4 years, 2021, 2019, and 18, were all WGCs. So, much smaller field, premier field, not unlike in terms of this year's playoffs, but, you also had foreign players, international players playing in these WGCs that won't be here for the playoffs. So I don't want to put a whole lot of stock into it, but over the past 4 or 5 tournaments at TPC Southwind, Hideki's played well, Rory, Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, Tommy Fleetwood, Jordan Spieth. You won't see any miscuts, of course, in these 4 years since it was a WGC. Now 2017 you might. So Adam Hadwin didn't play. Justin Rose didn't play in 2018. Garrett Higgo withdrew in 2021. But there are your players that have played well at TPC Southwind. Granted, different format with it being a WGC. But there's your top players. And we will move on over to Microsoft Excel. Again, like I said, this is going to be a bit of a shorter show with nothing to compare. And I'll bring up my comparison course file. I'm treating this as new. I suppose you could perhaps look at the WGC 2021, 2020, 19, and 18 and compare. But again, that's a limited size field. I didn't want to do that against full field course averages. Microsoft Excel is having quite a bit of trouble. So just nothing here and nothing in terms of the detail, as I am going to treat this as a brand new year, and moving forward I'll start collecting, but nothing in terms of against other courses. So a unique challenge this week. So let's come over to the early look file. And here are the players that have made the playoffs this year who played in a WGC at TPC Southwind. So that's 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Just 2019, 2020, and 2021. You see here, Sam Burns finished second one of those years in a WGC. Harris English fourth. Let's see, Jordan Spieth played all 3 years, has averaged a top 20 finish. Rory's top 21. Hideki 22nd, average finish. Fitzpatrick 22nd. So not a lot of data here. In fact, the bottom is Adam Hadwin. He only played it 1 year, was 72nd. They didn't do anything on the greens apparently. But not a lot of data here, so we won't have to do any filtering much. I'm not going to remove any players. If we take a look at the players who have averaged, let's go with the top 25. Again, specifically when the FedEx St. Jude was a WGC event. Small field, elite field. That's why I wanted to use that as the comparison for this week. You see off the tee, surprisingly, at least for me, wasn't really all that much. It's only a 0.7. My guess is that the fairways weren't really mattering, which seems a little bit odd to me because these fairways are so difficult to hit. They're so narrow. But you see approach very, very high. Only 2 players negative in strokes gained approaches, a 1.7 around the green. Your elite performers are doing well around the green. Kind of falls off pretty quickly there. However, for the players that played a WGC event very, very well, is outweighing off the tee. Putting is a 1.5. Okay. Moving into the driving and greens page view, distance, not a lot here. In fact, this is negative. And again, this is based on when it was a WGC and against those fields. Rory always had the distance. Brendan Todd's never going to be positive in distance, but generally speaking, these are pretty darn close to zero. So field average, pretty darn close to it. Fairways, you got a few players that are negative here. Few players that are really performing well in the fairways. Colin Morikawa, that's his game. Brendan Todd, surprisingly, not very high in the fairways, even though lack of distance. 1.6. Whereas the greens, you see, even with the small number here, negative 0.5, negative 0.2, you see how deep into the negative in terms of color shading. Negative 0.5 would be generally pretty close to yellow or neutral. It's deep orange because greens are just very important here. Very important. That's a 2.5 versus the fairways, which is a 1.6. So that doesn't surprise me much. I imagine we would be looking at greens this week since these are very small and they're generally hard to hit. So in the beginning of our research, I'm going to be looking at greens. I still have to think that fairways would be important, but man, at least from the WGCs, they weren't. So we're looking at greens to start. Scoring, again, from WGCs, this was more about the birdies. You see Sam Burns. Granted, it's only one time. Harris English. So for the players that have played it multiple times, I'll highlight those rows just to make it easier to see real quick. We'll go to Cantley. Bogeys, birdies, bogeys, bogeys, avoided being the main. More so in the bogey avoidance for the players who have played it multiple times. Again, for that same top 25, you got a 1.9 in birdies gained, a 2.1 in bogeys avoided. So pretty close, but what I would have thought leaning towards the bogey avoidance, there's only 2 players negative in terms of bogey avoidance, 0.6, 0.3 in terms of the negative. You just have some very, very high numbers in the birdies gained. But I'm still leaning towards bogey avoidance. There's quite a few bogeys around TPC Southwind. All right. Pars 3s, 4s, and 5s. If the graphs in Fantasy National aren't misleading, these will be about the same. Let's see. This is a 0.4. That's pretty darn low. Par 4s, nobody's negative in them, so I can tell you it's not going to be low. This is a 3.8. So a little bit shocking to see that. I'll bring back Fantasy National. Hopefully the vision's not too skewed. You can see this. Yeah. So for the winners, par 3s and 4s were identical. If we would go to the top 10, or shoot, I meant to say top 10s, but there's the top 20s. Par 4s slightly over the par 3s. I mean, par 4s are slightly over the par 3s for the top 10, so it's quite interesting to see that for the players that played the WGC at TPC Southwind, they were all about the par 4s. It's very interesting to see that. So we'll scrutinize that quite a bit in the data dive tomorrow when we look at some prior leaderboards. And then par 5s for the same players that finished in the top 25, 0.8. You do have quite a few players that are negative in the par 5s. You got a 1, 1.5. Whereas in the par 3s, these numbers aren't big, but there's not a lot of players that are negative in them. You got a negative 1.1 and a 0.3. These smaller numbers here, I don't know. Interesting to see. We'll have to do some investigation tomorrow in terms of prior leaderboards and whatnot. See if we can't get a good feel for that. Then lastly, for proximity, total prox is actually a pretty big deal for the players who have played well. Okay, I can maybe understand that since if the greens are so small, everyone's generally closer to the hole anyway. Every foot is going to be that much more emphasized on these small greens. Okay. 150 to 175 and 175 to 200 are the main 2 proximity ranges. 150 to 175 is pretty darn solid here. You got a few negatives, but they're pretty darn close to field average. It's a 19.7. That's pretty high. Whereas in the 175 to 200, it's negative, but it's really kind of getting hurt by Scotty Scheffler here, Brendan Todd. That 150 to 175 number is pretty big, though. So this is a 19.7. If we come over here to the comparison course, I'm just going to take a quick gander at a course that's a 19.7 in the 150 to 175. Anything close to that 19.7. Okay. No. Still no. No. 16. Wow, there you go. There's something to look at. So, of all the tournaments on the PGA Tour, the Wyndham is the highest at a 17.96 in terms of 150 to 175 in terms of its importance. And if you look across and see the importance on 150 to 175, it was 75% for the Wyndham. So probably a lot of emphasis this week on that 150 to 175 range based on the players that were playing the best at TPC Southwind when it was a WGC. Very interesting to see that. Not a lot of players negative here, and those negatives are very, very small. But there's a look at the players and their performance when the St. Jude was a WGC. Again, shorter show, but that's going to do it for the initial research this evening. As a quick reminder, this is when the St. Jude was a WGC, the 3 years. How many times did the player play, their average finish, and their average stat across those 3 years. That's going to do it for the initial research show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching and listening, supporting the channel. A reminder that if you had success at the Wyndham, let me know in the comments. Reach out to me on social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success, along with Gabe, who had a very successful DFS this week for the Wyndham. I can't say we lost any momentum. We still finished about even or about broke even this week. So we're going to see if we can't increase our luck, get a little bit of better performance for the first playoff event of the 2023 season, the FedEx St. Jude. Thanks for supporting the channel and tuning in. For all of the wagers you made this past week for the Wyndham Championship, for all of the DFS contests you played this past week at the Wyndham Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.